first child born between the stars would open her eyes inside a room that had never known wind. Air would enter through silent vents above the medical bed, measured for oxygen, humidity, temperature, pressure, and traces of contamination. The light surrounding her would imitate a morning occurring nowhere outside the hull. Beyond several layers of metal, water, insulation, and radiation shielding, interstellar darkness would extend for trillions of kilometers. She would enter life farther from Earth than any human generation before her, carrying a body shaped by a planet she had never touched. Her parents might remember Earth, or they might belong to the first generation born aboard. They would hold her beneath artificial gravity created by the rotation of the habitat, listening for the steady machinery that confirmed the world remained alive. The child would never feel that gravity was artificial. She would never regard the ceiling as confinement or the vibration of pumps as background noise. These conditions would form the original landscape of her nervous system, as natural to her as oceans, weather, soil, and sunlight had once been to children on Earth. If she survived infancy, she could live an entire lifetime without seeing a true horizon. Every drop of water she drank would belong to a closed cycle. Every breath would depend upon plants, filters, microorganisms, sensors, and technicians. Her body might develop differently under rotation, radiation, restricted microbes, engineered food, and a sky whose color followed software. Her mind would inherit stories of forests and storms from people long dead. She would be human through ancestry, though every direct experience defining her world would have arisen between the stars. Human development begins long before birth. A fertilized cell divides, specializes, folds, and assembles itself according to genetic instructions, interacting continuously with its environment. Gravity influences fluids, cells, bones, muscles, balance, and the physical orientation of the developing body. Radiation can damage DNA. Nutrition alters growth. Stress hormones pass through the parent. Microorganisms help shape immunity. A generation ship would have to recreate the conditions that Earth supplied throughout the evolution of pregnancy, without anyone ever designing them deliberately. No human pregnancy has been carried from conception to birth during a long interstellar voyage. Short experiments involving animals and cells provide fragments of evidence, leaving the deepest questions unanswered. Early embryos may respond to altered gravity in ways difficult to predict from adult astronauts. Organs forming under rotation could develop normally, adapt subtly, or reveal vulnerabilities only years later. The placenta, circulation, inner ear, skeleton, brain, and immune system would all emerge within an environment unlike the one in which human reproduction evolved. The ship could reduce uncertainty by creating artificial gravity close to that of Earth. Residential and medical habitats would rotate around a central axis, producing an outward force against their floors. The strength of that force would depend upon the size and speed of rotation. A large ring turning gradually would offer conditions gentler than a small chamber spinning rapidly. Pregnancy wards might be placed at a carefully chosen radius, protected from vibration and changes in rotational speed. Artificial gravity would remain an approximation shaped by geometry. A person's feet would occupy a slightly greater radius than the head, experiencing a different effective force. Moving inward or outward would change apparent weight. Turning the head during rapid rotation could disturb balance through Coriolis effects. Engineers could make these differences small, although the developing human body might notice details that adults learn to ignore. The first pregnancies aboard would be monitored with an intensity few parents on Earth had experienced. Medical systems would follow blood flow, hormone levels, fetal movement, bone formation, neural development, and genetic damage. Every unusual measurement would carry personal meaning and mission-wide significance. A single healthy birth would provide reassurance. A pattern of complications could threaten the entire demographic future of the vessel. Parents might spend much of the pregnancy inside the highest gravity section available. They would follow carefully designed diets produced from crops, cultured proteins, fungi, algae, and manufactured nutrients. Sunlight would be replaced by lamps calibrated for biological rhythms and vitamin production. Exercise would help preserve cardiovascular health and muscle strength. Shielded sleeping rooms would reduce exposure during periods of elevated radiation. Radiation would remain one of the most persistent threats. Galactic cosmic rays can penetrate spacecraft and living tissue, producing complex damage along their paths. Thick shielding around maternity areas could use water, food, structural material, and specialized compounds. The ship might place its youngest passengers near the center of mass, surrounded by the greatest available protection. Shielding would lower exposure without creating complete safety. A voyage lasting centuries would subject reproductive cells and developing embryos to a radiation environment extending across generations. Medical teams might screen for mutations, repair certain genetic errors, and select embryos carrying lower-known risks. These interventions could preserve health while giving the ship's institutions considerable influence over who was born. Birth itself would occur inside a hospital that could never call for outside assistance. Complications requiring blood products, surgery, intensive neonatal care, or rare medication would need to be handled locally. The ship would carry robotic systems and extensive medical archives, though equipment and knowledge would have to remain functional across centuries. A child born prematurely might depend upon machines built from components manufactured aboard. Replacement sensors, pumps, membranes, and sterile tubing would need to meet exact standards. A tiny impurity harmless inside an industrial pipe could become dangerous within a neonatal device. The health of the youngest human aboard would depend upon an entire manufacturing civilization hidden behind the walls of the clinic. The population would require enough physicians, nurses, surgeons, geneticists, engineers, pharmacists, and laboratory specialists to maintain reproductive medicine through every generation. Training could never pause. An experienced obstetrician approaching old age would need several successors, since one accident could remove a rare skill from the vessel. Every successful birth would become both a private event and a public reassurance. The child's name might appear in demographic reports beside projected food demand, school capacity, future labor needs, and genetic diversity. Parents would want to protect the intimacy of family life from a society compelled to count every future citizen. The newborn's first sense of direction would arise from the rotating habitat. Down would point away from the ship's axis, toward the outer hull. Up would point inward, toward a region where gravity gradually weakened. This orientation would feel unquestionable. The child's muscles, bones, eyes, and inner ears would organize themselves around it. Walking near the rim could resemble walking on Earth if the habitat were large enough. Traveling toward the axis would create stranger experiences. The body would become lighter. Objects thrown through the air would curve from the expected path. A person jumping while the floor rotated beneath them would land somewhere slightly displaced. Children would learn these effects through play before understanding the physics. The central axis might contain transport corridors, manufacturing spaces, observatories, docks, and recreational chambers where near weightlessness was useful. Young people could float there under supervision, moving with gestures impossible near the residential floor. Their bodies would treat the experience as a temporary environment rather than a violation of nature. A child raised entirely in low gravity would face greater uncertainty. Bones need loading to develop strength. Muscles, circulation, and balance adapt to the forces placed upon them. A body formed under weak gravity might function well aboard and struggle severely on an Earth-like planet. The ship's designers would have to choose between optimizing people for the voyage and preserving their ability to live at the destination. Bones would carry a hidden record of every gravitational decision. On Earth, standing, walking, running, and lifting place repeated stress upon the skeleton. Cells respond by maintaining tissue capable of supporting the load. In microgravity, adult astronauts can lose bone density despite exercise and medical countermeasures. A developing child has no fully formed terrestrial skeleton to preserve. Their bones would grow according to the environment available from the beginning. Artificial gravity near Earth levels could support familiar development, though no one would know the exact threshold required during every stage of childhood. Perhaps full gravity would be essential during infancy and adolescence. Perhaps several hours a day would provide enough stimulus. Perhaps rotation would create differences in the spine, legs, and balance system that only appeared after decades. The ship might maintain several gravity zones for research and health. Children could spend most of each day near one Earth gravity, exercise briefly at higher levels, and enter lower gravity areas for education or transport. Medical teams would compare growth across cohorts, adjusting recommendations with each generation. Such experiments would involve lives rather than temporary volunteers. A policy chosen for one cohort could produce adults better suited to the ship and less capable of planetary settlement. Future knowledge could reveal that earlier children received insufficient loading. Their bodies would carry an error that no later correction fully removed. Muscles would develop alongside bones. Infants build strength through the effort of lifting the head, rolling, crawling, standing, and walking against gravity. Each movement teaches the nervous system how much force is required and how the body relates to the ground. Altered gravity would reshape these milestones. In a rotating habitat producing Earth-like force, development might appear familiar. Subtle rotational effects could influence crawling direction, balance, and spatial judgment. Parents might notice that children preferred turning one way through certain corridors. Playground design would account for curves in the trajectory of running, jumping, and thrown objects. Under weaker gravity, infants could lift themselves earlier and fall more slowly. Their legs might carry less muscle. They could leap great distances while lacking the strength expected by Earth-raised doctors. Movement would become elegant and effortless within the ship, creating bodies adapted to a lighter world. Arrival at a planet with stronger gravity could feel like sudden illness. The heart would work harder to move blood. Standing could cause dizziness. Joints and bones would receive unfamiliar loads. Adults born between the stars might require months or years of gradual conditioning before walking outside, and some might never become fully capable of life on the surface. The inner ear would face a world built from rotation. Fluid-filled canals help the brain detect movement and orientation. On Earth, signals from the eyes, muscles, and vestibular system develop under one gravitational field extending in a nearly constant direction. A ship's rotating environment would produce a more complicated relationship between motion and apparent gravity. Children might adapt more completely than adults. Their brains would learn the ship's dynamics as the original pattern of reality. Movements that made newly arrived Earthborn passengers nauseous could feel ordinary to them. They might predict curved trajectories intuitively and move through changing gravity with exceptional confidence. This adaptation could create difficulty elsewhere. On a non-rotating planet, the same instincts might produce errors. A child could expect certain visual and bodily signals that the planet failed to provide. The open sky, distant horizon, and uninterrupted gravitational field might initially feel disorienting. The crew would use virtual and physical training to prepare future settlers. Rotational simulations could be reduced gradually. Visual environments would reproduce planetary horizons. Centrifuges and non-rotating chambers would teach the nervous system alternative relationships between motion and balance. A person born aboard could learn planetary movement as a second physical language, fluent enough for function and never quite as instinctive as the first. Vision would develop without natural distance unless the ship deliberately created it. Human eyes focus across rooms, streets, fields, mountains, and horizons. A generation ship might contain large habitats extending for kilometers, though much of childhood would still occur near walls, ceilings, screens, and curved interior landscapes. Designers would provide long sight lines to support visual health and psychological comfort. Central parks could stretch along the rotating cylinder. Lighting and atmospheric perspective would make distant structures appear softer. Children would look across water, gardens, sports fields, and residential districts toward a landscape curving overhead. Even the largest habitat would reveal its limits. The far ground might rise into the artificial sky. A mountain would be a constructed hill whose depth and geology were known. The horizon would curve upward rather than hiding the world beyond it. Every view would remain enclosed within the same engineered body. Virtual displays could simulate greater distances with extraordinary realism. A wall might open visually onto a terrestrial coast, a desert plain, or a forest extending farther than any physical chamber. The eyes would receive distance cues while the body remained aware of the nearby boundary through sound, air movement, and memory. A true sky has no nearby surface. It changes through atmosphere, sunlight, weather, dust, water, and the rotation of a planet. Children aboard would know these facts from education. Their lived sky would consist of panels, projected depth, structural supports, and carefully managed brightness. The ship might imitate dawn with a gradual increase in warm light. Artificial clouds could move across vast ceiling displays. Rain chambers would release water above gardens. Lightning and thunder could be simulated during festivals or psychological training. These events would reproduce selected features of weather without sharing its scale or unpredictability. A storm on Earth can build beyond human control, darkening an entire region and moving across landscapes no observer can see completely. A ship storm would begin after technicians authorized it. Drainage systems would collect every drop. The wind would remain within structural limits. Emergency controls could end the event. Children might still experience fear, wonder, and joy beneath simulated weather. Their emotions would be real even when the storm was designed. A person does not require natural lightning for the body to respond to light, sound, and trembling air. The difference would live in their knowledge that somebody, somewhere, could turn the sky off. Day and night would follow the needs of bodies and society. Human circadian rhythms respond to light, darkness, meals, activity, and social schedules. The ship could maintain a 24-hour cycle inherited from Earth, preserving biological familiarity across generations. There would be no astronomical necessity for this duration between stars. The vessel could choose longer or shorter days according to energy use, work patterns, and medical evidence. Changing the cycle would reach into sleep, childhood, labor, religion, festivals, and the measurement of age. Separate habitats might adopt slightly different schedules. Agricultural districts could coordinate lighting around crop efficiency. Industrial sections might operate continuously through rotating shifts. Families moving between districts would experience artificial time zones within the same vessel. Children would learn that morning was a social and biological event rather than the arrival of a star above the horizon. Night would come because lights dimmed and public activity slowed. The darkness beyond the hull remained unchanged throughout both. The distinction between cosmic night and human night could become central to the culture. One surrounded the ship eternally, the other offered rest. Sleep would be protected carefully because fatigue threatens judgment, mood, learning, immunity, and social cooperation. Cabins would control noise, temperature, and light. Machinery vibration would be dampened, though complete silence might feel dangerous to people raised with the sound of life support. The steady hum of ventilation could become associated with safety from infancy. A sudden stop would wake sleepers before an alarm sounded. Parents might use recordings of pumps and fans to calm children in unfamiliar sections of the ship. Earth recordings of rain, waves, insects, and wind could serve as sleep sounds. A child might fall asleep to an ocean they had never seen, learning its rhythm as an intimate artificial memory. The recording would preserve real water moving on a planet several generations behind them. Dreams would combine inherited images with the architecture of the vessel. People might dream of endless corridors, broken ceilings opening into space, forests growing through machinery, or planets whose surfaces curved upward like home. Earth could appear in dreams as a place assembled from lessons and stories rather than personal experience. The microbiome of shipborne children would differ from that of their ancestors. Human bodies host vast communities of bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other microorganisms. These organisms influence digestion, immunity, metabolism, and development. Earth supplied an immense microbial diversity through soil, animals, food, water, air, and contact among populations. A closed ship would begin with a selected portion of that diversity. Some microorganisms would disappear. Others would adapt to surfaces, filters, crops, waste systems, and human bodies. Every child would inherit a microbiological world shaped by decades or centuries of isolation. Excessive sterilization could reduce infection while depriving the immune system of ordinary exposure. Too little control could allow persistent pathogens to spread through the entire population. The ship would need to manage microbial ecology rather than attempting to eliminate it. Children might grow up with immune systems well adapted to the vessel and poorly prepared for a planet. Soil dust, pollen-like particles, native organisms, and unfamiliar environmental chemistry could trigger dangerous responses. Settlers might need gradual exposure, vaccines, engineered microbes, or sealed habitats long after arrival. Their bodies would carry an ecosystem born between stars alongside them. Food would define childhood through taste, routine, culture, and memory. The ship could grow grains, vegetables, fruits, legumes, herbs, fungi, algae, and engineered crops. Cultured proteins and fermentation would expand variety. Recipes from Earth would survive even when their ingredients changed. A dish associated with a coastal region might contain no animal taken from an ocean. Fruit flavors could come from cultivars designed for compact growth and high nutrient density. Meat could be produced from cells without a living herd. Dairy textures might arise through microbial processes whose creators had studied cows only through archives. Children would regard these foods as authentic because they formed the meals of family life. A founder might describe a strawberry grown in soil beneath sunlight and find the shipborne version subtly different. Several generations later, the modified fruit would become the standard against which all others were judged. Food shortages or crop failures would leave cultural scars. A disease affecting one plant could remove a familiar flavor for decades. Recipes would survive in books while the ingredient existed only in frozen tissue or genetic records. Cuisine would become an archive capable of changing, disappearing, and returning. The child's relationship with animals would depend upon what the vessel could support. Large mammals require space, food, water, waste processing, veterinary care, and genetic diversity. The ship might carry few or none. Their existence would be preserved through recordings, embryos, genetic archives, and virtual environments. Small animals could serve ecological, scientific, and emotional roles. Fish might live within food systems. Insects could pollinate plants. Birds might inhabit large gardens if their flight and population were manageable. Dogs, cats, or smaller companion animals could exist if the society considered their psychological value worth the resources. A child meeting a living dog would experience another species shaped by thousands of years beside humanity. A child seeing an elephant only through simulation might understand its size intellectually and fail to imagine the physical presence of such an animal. The concept of wilderness would be especially difficult. Every living organism aboard would have entered through human selection or later evolution within a controlled ecosystem. Even creatures moving freely through a forest chamber belong to a population monitored by sensors and protected through policy. No animal would exist entirely beyond the ship's decisions. Nature aboard would be authentic biological life arranged within artificial boundaries. Trees would grow, age, suffer disease, shed leaves, and die. Water would evaporate and return. Insects would escape intended habitats. Fungi would spread through damp material. Evolution would continue regardless of engineering plans. Children could form genuine bonds with gardens and animals. They would know individual trees, hidden paths, seasonal scents, and the places where water gathered after scheduled rain. These memories would possess the emotional force of any childhood landscape. The ship's nature would remain vulnerable to administrative change. A council facing power shortages might reduce lighting in a forest. A crop emergency could transform a park into agricultural space. A tree planted for beauty might be removed because its roots threatened a water pipe. On Earth, human decisions have always altered landscapes. The difference aboard would be the absence of any larger biosphere capable of continuing beyond them. Every forest existed because the ship continued feeding it light, air, water, and space. The child would learn that nature and machinery belong to the same living structure. Education about Earth would begin before children understood distance. Classrooms would show continents, oceans, deserts, forests, glaciers, cities, and animals. The planet would appear through films recorded at ground level and images taken from orbit. Students could explore accurate simulations of places whose physical existence continued far behind them. Earth might feel more visually familiar than sections of their own ship they had never visited. Archives could contain millions of hours of terrestrial footage. A child could recognize the streets of an ancient city, the sound of tropical rain and the appearance of a whale surfacing while knowing none of them through direct sensation. Teachers would explain that these images belonged to history. Earth continued changing after departure. Some landscapes might still exist, others could have vanished. Communication delays would ensure that every new image arrived from a planet already older than the recording. The child would inherit two Earths, the world preserved in the archive and the unseen world continuing beyond the reach of current knowledge. Neither would be home in the ordinary physical sense. Adults born on Earth might speak of nature with a grief their children found difficult to share. They would describe cold air entering the lungs, mud under shoes, sunlight passing through leaves, salt drying on skin, and the immense pressure of standing beside an ocean. The child could listen with affection while feeling no personal loss. They had never possessed these experiences. The ship offered gardens, water, family, and a complete social world. Earth would belong to the parents' memory in the same way an ancestral village once belonged to families who migrated across continents. This emotional difference could create distance between generations. Parents might interpret curiosity as insufficient love or indifference as betrayal. Children could feel pressured to mourn a planet they had never known. The cultural authority of the Earth-born generation would weaken as its members aged. The last person with direct memories of Earth would eventually die. Afterward, every description would pass through archive or inheritance. The planet's reality would remain scientifically secure while its emotional presence changed. A generation could preserve Earth faithfully and stop longing for it. The ship itself would become the primary homeland. Districts would carry personal and historical meaning. A child might identify with the Southern Agricultural Ring, an axial neighborhood, or a habitat built after a major reconstruction. Accents, customs, and professions could develop around these locations. The vessel's map would replace planetary geography. Directions would include spinward, counterspinward, inward, outward, forward, and aft. Elevation would refer to distance from the rotational rim. Travel between habitats could involve trains passing through low-gravity tunnels and sealed structural hubs. Children would memorize emergency routes alongside ordinary streets. Every district would contain pressure doors capable of isolating it from the rest of the ship. A familiar corridor could become an impassable boundary during fire, contamination, or decompression. Home would consist of rooms and people held within a structure whose safety systems remained visible. The possibility of catastrophe would enter geography. A child would know where to run when alarms changed tone, which walls could seal and which shelters offered radiation protection. Emergency training would begin early. Children would learn to recognize pressure loss, fire, toxic contamination, medical alarms, and failures of artificial gravity. They would practice sealing masks, following illuminated paths, and entering protected chambers without waiting for parents. These lessons could frighten them, though ignorance would be more dangerous. The ship's society would normalize preparation in the same way communities on Earth learned to respond to earthquakes, storms, or war. Games and stories could make procedures memorable without concealing their importance. A child might experience several real emergencies during life. Most would be contained quickly: a local fire, a temporary pressure drop, a crop infection, or a power interruption. Each event would reinforce dependence upon collective discipline. Some children would lose family members during accidents. Grief would spread through a small population where every death affected work, genealogy, and social relationships. Memorials would contain technical explanations beside personal stories, ensuring that later generations understood both the failure and the people it removed. Safety knowledge would become part of cultural inheritance. Play would prepare children for the physical world of the ship. Low-gravity games could involve three-dimensional movement through central chambers. Rotating sports would use curved trajectories that Earthborn players found confusing. Teams might compete across surfaces extending around the inside of a cylinder. Toys would teach repair, ecology, navigation, and cooperation. Children could build miniature air systems, grow small gardens, or guide simulated vessels through changing gravitational fields. The boundary between play and essential education would remain fluid. Outdoor games, in the terrestrial sense, would have no exact equivalent. Large public habitats would provide open movement beneath artificial skies. Parents would still know the air volume, exits, and monitoring systems enclosing every activity. Children might invent stories about escaping beyond the walls. Space itself would be too lethal to function as a wilderness. Exploration would occur through maintenance passages, unused compartments, virtual worlds, and restricted districts whose histories attracted curiosity. The forbidden place aboard would often be an abandoned human space rather than untouched nature. Adolescence would bring a growing awareness of confinement. Young children accept their environment as complete. Teenagers test limits, question authority, and imagine alternatives. A generation ship would offer few physical exits from the society they challenged. A young person could move to another habitat, join a different profession, adopt another community, or immerse themselves in virtual environments. These choices might provide substantial freedom. The ship would still determine available air, gravity, territory, and destination. Some adolescents would become fascinated by spacewalks, exterior engineering, or navigation because these roles approach the boundary of the world. Wearing a suit beyond the hull would offer direct contact with interstellar space through layers of protective material. The stars would no longer appear on a screen. Others would avoid windows and exterior views. The knowledge of vacuum surrounding every room could provoke anxiety. A transparent observation dome might feel like exposure rather than beauty. The same darkness could represent freedom, danger, emptiness, or a future destination according to the person looking into it. Mental health would depend upon more than the size of the habitat. Isolation arises from limited choice, repeated social contact, distance from external communities, and the inability to leave an environment. A ship containing thousands of people could still produce profound confinement. Children would grow within stable social networks where anonymity remained limited. Teachers knew families. Employers knew teachers. Medical records, genealogy, and professional needs connected institutions. A mistake could follow someone across districts and decades. Privacy would require strong cultural and legal protection. Personal rooms, confidential medicine, secure communication, and freedom from unnecessary monitoring would help individuals develop independent identities. Safety systems would still track location during emergencies and detect environmental risks. The tension between privacy and survival would persist. A person disappearing from public life might be experiencing depression or preparing sabotage. Authorities could justify surveillance through collective safety. A society raised entirely aboard might accept forms of monitoring that Earthborn founders once considered intrusive. Depression among the shipborne would rarely arise from missing Earth directly. It could emerge from monotony, inherited duty, restricted opportunity, family conflict, or the belief that life served a mission whose conclusion remained centuries away. A person might complete essential work while feeling that every future resembled the present. The ship moved through space. Though the interior world changed slowly, the destination star could remain visually unchanged throughout an entire lifetime. Mental health care would provide therapy, medication, social support, artistic activity, physical exercise, and changes of environment. Virtual worlds could offer forests, cities, oceans, and imagined planets. These spaces would relieve confinement and create their own risks of withdrawal. A person spending most waking hours inside a terrestrial simulation might find the physical ship increasingly unbearable. Another could build relationships and creative work there that remained as meaningful as activities in shared physical space. The society would need to recognize psychological reality without allowing simulated life to weaken the labor and cooperation maintaining the vessel. Virtual Earth would become one of the most powerful cultural technologies aboard. People could walk through accurate reconstructions of cities, forests, mountains, and coastlines. Haptic systems might reproduce rain, wind, temperature, texture, and scent. Artificial intelligence could populate the environments with historical figures or reconstructed relatives. Children could experience an Earth assembled from data more orderly than the original planet. Dangerous animals could be removed. Weather could remain pleasant. Cities could appear at their most beautiful hour. Users could cross continents without travel time and visit extinct ecosystems without risk. The simulation would shape beliefs about the ancestral world. A generation preferring idealized environments might come to regard Earth as a lost paradise. Historians would remind them of disease, conflict, pollution, inequality, disaster, and ordinary discomfort. Commercial designers would favor experiences people enjoyed. Debates over authenticity would become intense. One Earth might reproduce a specific year. Another could combine landscapes from different eras. A third might show a world repaired according to ecological hopes never achieved before departure. The simulated planet would reveal more about the ship's desires with every century. Some people would reject virtual nature and insist upon physical experience. They would work in gardens, care for animals, swim in water reservoirs adapted for recreation, and seek the largest available spaces. Their movement could become a cultural philosophy centered upon direct contact with matter. They might argue that bodies need resistance, irregularity, risk, and sensory complexity. A virtual forest can reproduce appearance while providing no living roots, microbial exchange, or unpredictable ecology. Physical nature aboard would remain engineered, though it could surprise its caretakers. Others would see little moral distinction between designed physical environments and designed virtual ones. Both depended upon technology. Both shaped perception. The relevant question concerned whether an experience supported health, meaning, and social life. A generation born between stars would develop concepts of reality less dependent upon natural origin. Authenticity might refer to consequences and relationships rather than whether an environment arose without human design. The ship itself had been artificial at launch and became the only natural world its children knew. Language would preserve the landscapes absent from experience. People would continue speaking of sunrise, roots, currents, fields, horizons, storms, and paths. Some words would acquire ship-specific meanings. A field could mean an agricultural deck. A sunrise could refer to the habitat lighting sequence. A current might describe water, electricity, air, or movement through a corridor. Expressions involving weather and animals could survive after their original images faded. Someone might speak of the calm before the storm while thinking first of a scheduled atmospheric simulation or a political crisis. A person could describe a workplace as a jungle after seeing jungles only through archives. New vocabulary would arise for sensations Earth languages never needed to distinguish. Different degrees of rotational gravity, structural vibration, air quality, corridor orientation, and radiation shelter status would enter ordinary conversation. Children might possess precise words for the feeling of becoming lighter while traveling toward the axis. They could distinguish several kinds of artificial morning by color and schedule. Their poetry would use machinery with the intimacy once given to rivers and seasons. Religion would adapt to a world without terrestrial sky. Traditions organized around sunrise, lunar cycles, holy directions, pilgrimage, and natural landscapes would require reinterpretation. Artificial time could preserve prayer schedules. Virtual environments could reproduce sacred places. Objects carried from Earth might acquire immense significance. New beliefs could arise around the ship's journey. The vessel might be viewed as an ark, an ancestor, a test, or a living covenant between generations. Air and water cycles could acquire ritual meaning. Maintenance work might be honored as service to the unborn. Children born aboard could accept these traditions without sharing the founder's grief. Earth might become a sacred origin rather than a lost home. The destination star could symbolize fulfillment, judgment, renewal, or danger. Religious conflict could form around arrival. Some groups might believe humans were meant to return to planetary life. Others could consider the ship the environment in which humanity had been transformed for a new age. Decisions about gravity, reproduction, genetic modification, and settlement would carry spiritual dimensions. Art would record the inner life of people who had never seen nature outside a controlled environment. Early ship art might imitate terrestrial forms, landscape painting, ocean music, stories about departure, and images of open sky. Later artists would turn toward curvature, rotation, recycled materials, mechanical rhythm, and the geometry of enclosed worlds. A sculptor could use metal removed from an ancient engine, preserving its service history within the new work. A composer might build music around the frequencies of ventilation systems and bearings. Dancers could perform in changing gravity, moving from the rim toward the axis as their bodies became lighter. The physical conditions of the ship would create artistic possibilities unavailable on Earth. Three-dimensional theaters could surround audiences in low gravity. Liquid sculptures might float in controlled chambers. Light could move across the curved interior of a habitat, transforming architecture into performance. Earthborn critics might once have described these forms as space art. For the shipborn, they would simply be art, arising from the world available to them. Family stories would carry fragments of Earth through intimate detail. A grandparent might repeat an ancestor's memory of a summer garden, a train station, or a storm passing above an apartment. The story would change slightly with each telling. Certain families would guard their terrestrial origins carefully. They might preserve languages, recipes, clothing, music, and names associated with a region left behind. Others would form identities around ship districts, professions, or events occurring during the voyage. After enough generations, almost everyone would share many founders. Family trees would overlap across the population. A child could trace ancestry to people from several continents while feeling primarily connected to the habitat where they grew up. The question, "Where are you from?" would refer to a ring, district, or communal lineage. Earth would answer a different question. Where did humanity begin? Reproduction would shape culture because the ship could support only a planned population range. Children might grow up knowing that their births occurred during an authorized demographic period. The number of siblings, timing of parenthood, and availability of housing could depend upon population forecasts. This knowledge could create gratitude, discomfort, or resistance. A person might feel wanted by their family and required by the mission at once. Their existence would satisfy emotional hopes and statistical needs. As adults, they could face pressure to have children because their genetic ancestry remained underrepresented. A couple might receive advice to use reproductive material from the archive. Medical institutions would try to protect diversity while respecting intimate choices. The society's survival would depend upon people continuing to desire parenthood. Coercion could damage trust and family life. Complete demographic freedom could produce dangerous fluctuations. Stable reproduction would require institutions considered legitimate by generations who never consented to the original voyage. Children would notice early that certain professions carried unusual respect. Life support engineers, physicians, agricultural specialists, teachers, and structural technicians maintained the conditions of existence. Their work could be celebrated through ceremonies and public education. Respect could become expectation. A child showing mathematical ability might be directed toward reactor engineering. Someone with strong coordination could be trained for exterior repair. Professional choice would occur within the needs of a limited population. The ship would need to preserve freedom for motivation and innovation. People forced into roles may perform poorly or rebel. A society allowing every essential discipline to lose students would become vulnerable. Education would combine exploration of talent with honest information about collective needs. Children could rotate through practical work before choosing a path. Artificial intelligence might identify strengths without making binding decisions. Apprenticeship would connect generations and give technical knowledge a human relationship. A profession would become an inheritance offered rather than imposed. Political identity would begin forming during childhood. Students would learn the ship's charter, the history of crises, and the reasons certain freedoms had limits. They would study incidents where secrecy, privilege, or poor leadership threatened survival. The vessel might operate as a federation of habitats. Local councils would govern schools, culture, and daily services. while shared institutions managed navigation, life support, population, defense, and major industry. Children would belong to a neighborhood and a ship-wide civilization. Political disagreement would be unavoidable and necessary. Decisions about energy, reproduction, habitat expansion, artificial intelligence, and arrival involve values alongside engineering. A system suppressing dissent could become efficient briefly and dangerously rigid over time. Shipborne citizens might view democracy through the conditions of closed survival. Public debate could be extensive, while certain technical actions remained prohibited. Nobody could vote to turn off oxygen purification immediately. The boundary between collective choice and physical necessity would require continuous examination. Crime would carry consequences shaped by enclosure. Theft of personal property could be handled through familiar legal principles. Sabotage of air, water, agriculture, or navigation could threaten thousands of lives. The society would need secure systems and penalties strong enough to deter catastrophic harm. Permanent imprisonment consumes space and labor. Exile outside the vessel would mean execution. Relocation to another habitat might protect victims while preserving the offender's capacity to contribute. Rehabilitation would have practical value alongside moral importance. Children would grow up knowing that everyone remained part of the same closed population, including people who caused serious harm. Justice would need to protect safety without treating humans as disposable. Generational memory could make reintegration difficult. Families might remember an act of sabotage for centuries. Descendants could inherit stigma unless law and culture prevented responsibility from passing through bloodlines. A stable ship would require the ability to remember dangers and release inherited hatred. Physical beauty standards would change with the environment. Bodies adapted to artificial gravity, controlled nutrition, and the genetic composition of the population could develop shared traits. Clothing would respond to temperature, work, rotation, and limited materials. Pale skin might become common if light exposure remained low unless lamps deliberately reproduced a broader spectrum. Muscular development would depend upon gravity and exercise. Height could change across generations under altered loading and selection. Fashion would use recycled fibers, engineered materials, personal displays, and items carrying family history. A garment containing cloth preserved from earth might become ceremonial. Everyday clothing would be designed for repair and long use. People would find one another beautiful within the forms created by their world. A body considered fragile under Earth gravity might move with grace in low gravity. Shipborne aesthetics would reflect the lives those bodies actually lived. Sexuality and partnership would unfold under demographic observation. The ship's institutions might separate romantic relationships from reproductive recommendations. Couples could form freely while using stored genetic material or medical assistance for children. The population's limited size would still make privacy difficult. Former partners remained nearby. Family networks overlapped. Social information traveled quickly. Strong norms against harassment and coercion would be necessary within communities where avoiding someone permanently was hard. Different family structures could emerge. Children might be raised by two parents, larger households, communal groups, or combinations shaped by work and demographic needs. Biological parenthood would form one part of family identity. The stability of childhood would matter more than preserving one inherited model. The ship would experiment socially because its environment demanded adaptation. Successful forms would become tradition for later generations. Death aboard would return the body to a closed material system. Burial in soil would consume space and alter ecological chemistry. Release into space would remove valuable matter permanently. Cremation would require energy and produce gases needing treatment. The society might process remains through carefully designed biological systems, returning water, carbon, minerals, and nutrients to agriculture. Ceremonies would preserve dignity while acknowledging material continuity. A tree or garden could receive part of the recovered matter. Children would learn that the atoms in their food and bodies had passed through earlier generations. This knowledge might inspire reverence, discomfort, or a practical acceptance unfamiliar to many Earth cultures. Memorials would preserve names and stories without preserving every body physically. The ship could contain digital halls, engraved structures, music, and living gardens dedicated to the dead. The vessel would carry ancestors as matter, memory, and repaired machinery. The first fully shipborne adult would eventually become a parent. They would hold a child without possessing any direct experience of planetary life to pass onward. Earth stories would come from their own parents and the archive. Their parenting instincts would arise from life aboard. They would teach the child how to move through changing gravity, listen to machinery, care for plants, respect sealed doors, and read environmental displays. The child would inherit a complete survival culture without experiencing it as exceptional. This generational transition would prove that the ship contained a self-reproducing human society rather than a temporary crew. It would also reveal problems hidden during the founder era. Developmental differences, fertility patterns, cultural conflict, and technical dependence would become visible through the first adults formed entirely aboard. Success would never be established by one healthy generation. The environment must support childhood, adulthood, reproduction, aging, and the next cycle repeatedly. A subtle problem could emerge only in the grandchildren of the first passengers. Genetic evolution would proceed even with careful planning. Random mutations, genetic drift, reproductive patterns, and selection would alter the population. Medical intervention might slow harmful changes and introduce deliberate ones. Radiation resistance could become a target for genetic modification. Stronger DNA repair, altered cancer suppression, or protection against oxidative damage might improve survival. Bone development could be adjusted for the ship's gravity. Circadian biology might adapt to new schedules. Every change would raise uncertainty. A modification helpful during the voyage could create difficulty on the destination planet. Genes interact with many systems, and benefits discovered in one generation can produce costs in another. Political groups might disagree over what form humanity should preserve. Some would defend the launch-era genome as an inheritance. Others would consider adaptation an essential part of survival. Children born with modifications would live inside a debate conducted over their bodies. Cultural evolution would move faster than biological change. Within a few generations, shipborne customs could become unintelligible to Earth. Communication delays would intensify the separation. Messages arriving from the solar system would describe fashions, politics, technology, and language already years or decades old. The ship would respond from its own historical path. Earth might see the travelers as descendants of the launch civilization. The passengers could view Earth as a distant branch of humanity living under conditions they understood mainly through history. Neither side would represent the original culture forever. They would change apart. The generation ship would produce one civilization while the solar system produced many others. Children aboard could receive recordings from Earth children who became adults before the reply arrived. Friendship across distance would occur through messages addressed to earlier versions of each person. Communication would preserve connection and reveal the impossibility of sharing one present. A technical disaster could transform childhood for an entire generation. Suppose one rotating habitat lost structural stability and had to slow. Gravity would weaken gradually while engineers attempted repairs. Families might be relocated into crowded districts. Children remaining in the damaged habitat could experience months of reduced gravity during a critical developmental stage. Schools would close or move online. Playgrounds would become storage and emergency housing. Adults would work long shifts. Years later, the cohort might show differences in bone strength, balance, or anxiety. The event would enter their identity. They would be known by a name linked to the failed ring or the period of low gravity. The ship's history would mark bodies as well as architecture. Another generation could grow during abundance. New habitats might open, agricultural output could rise, and energy systems might operate with exceptional efficiency. Children would have larger rooms, more varied food, and greater freedom to travel. Their expectations would differ from those of parents raised during scarcity. Policies once accepted as necessary could feel intolerable. Political conflict might emerge when an older generation attempted to preserve habits formed by crisis. Stability would therefore require adaptation to success as well as failure. A society designed only around emergency could continue imposing austerity after conditions improved. Children born during abundance would demand reasons for every restriction. Generational conflict would reflect genuine differences in lived reality. Neither side could solve it through archive alone. The destination would shape identity long before arrival. Children would learn its gravity, star, orbital period, atmosphere, and possible landscapes. Educational games could simulate settlement. Professional training would prepare for planetary medicine, geology, construction, and ecology. The planet might remain several centuries away. Most students would never see it. Their work would support descendants whose names were unknown. Motivation could weaken unless the mission offered meaningful goals within each lifetime. The ship could divide the voyage into stages. One generation might expand manufacturing. Another could improve radiation shielding. Another would build landing craft or adapt crops. Every cohort would inherit a project capable of completion. Children need futures they can reach. The destination could remain a long horizon while life aboard offered nearer forms of achievement. Some shipborne adults might reject arrival entirely. They would have bodies adapted to rotation, families rooted in the vessel, and little desire to enter an uncontrolled planetary environment. The ship would contain everything they associated with civilization. Landing could require stronger gravity, unfamiliar microbes, weather, large-scale darkness, and a sky with no visible boundary. The planet would be the strange place. Its surface might feel exposed, dirty, dangerous, and impossibly vast. Others would long for it with an intensity created by confinement. They would dream of walking until the ship disappeared behind the horizon, seeing weather arrive without schedule, and standing beneath light produced by a real star. The conflict would involve two forms of human desire: belonging to the world that formed the body and reaching the world that gave the voyage purpose. Preparation for arrival would begin through controlled exposure. Artificial gravity could increase slowly toward the planet's level. Habitat lighting would reproduce the destination star. Atmospheric chambers would simulate pressure, temperature, wind, and sound. Children born during the final decades might spend part of each day in planetary training environments. Their bones and balance would develop with settlement in mind. Earlier generations could undergo more difficult rehabilitation. Large chambers would create uneven ground, mud, rock, flowing water, and unstructured vegetation. Participants would learn to move through environments where surfaces were not designed for efficient human passage. Falls and injuries could increase. A true horizon would remain impossible to reproduce fully. Virtual projection could extend distance, while the body knew the chamber ended. When the destination star became visibly brighter, children would gather in observation halls. They would know it as a point of light and as the source of every imagined landscape ahead. For the first time, its position could be identified without advanced instruments. The star would still resemble other stars to an untrained eye. Its emotional significance came from history, education, and expectation. Generations had lived and died while the ship moved toward that point. Some children would be young enough to reach the planet. Their bodies became the focus of medical planning. Diet, exercise, gravity exposure, and education would prepare them for an environment no human had yet tested directly. They would carry a responsibility created before their grandparents were born. They would also experience the destination as part of their own adulthood, rather than a distant inheritance. Robotic probes would enter the target system first. Their transmissions would reveal the planet's surface, atmosphere, radiation, and weather with increasing clarity. The shipborne population would finally receive images of a present world rather than ancient light. The data could show a planet compatible with settlement. It could reveal conditions requiring permanent sealed habitats. The target might contain life, toxic chemistry, violent climate, or gravity difficult for shipborne bodies. Every result would affect people differently according to their adaptation and beliefs. A planet close to Earth's gravity could welcome children trained for it and exclude adults weakened by lower gravity. A harmless atmosphere might remain unbreathable until immune systems adjusted. A beautiful landscape could provoke terror through its openness. Arrival would not erase the difference between planetary humans and people born between the stars. The first child to descend might have spent years inside training habitats. During the landing, gravity would build as the craft entered the atmosphere and engines slowed the fall. The body would feel weight changing through forces impossible to reproduce perfectly aboard. Clouds would surround the windows. Turbulence would move the vehicle without following programmed patterns. Light would shift according to weather. The planet would announce itself through unpredictability. After landing, the child would stand slowly. The floor would remain still beneath a gravity produced by mass rather than rotation. The inner ear might notice an absence difficult to name. Objects would fall without the curved behavior expected aboard. The door would remain closed while instruments tested the environment. Beyond it lay a world larger than every human structure the child had known. The first view outside could overwhelm the nervous system. The ground might extend toward a distant horizon beneath a sky containing depth no screen had reproduced. Clouds could move at several altitudes. Wind would carry material from regions beyond sight. A person born aboard might experience vertigo despite standing on solid ground. The absence of enclosing curvature could create the sensation of falling upward. Open space anxiety could appear among settlers accustomed to walls and visible boundaries. Helmets and habitat windows would provide frames, making the landscape easier to process. Excursions would begin briefly. People could walk near structures, touch local rock through gloves, and return to familiar pressure rooms. Children might adapt faster than adults. The planet would become normal through repeated experience, just as the ship once did. Weather would be one of the greatest revelations. Wind would vary without central control. Temperature could change across minutes and distance. Rain might fall unevenly, carrying scents and particles from the atmosphere. A storm could approach from beyond the horizon, visible hours before arrival. Settlers would observe a physical system larger than their community, indifferent to schedules and political authority. Emergency shelters would protect them while the planet moved according to its own energy. Shipborne people might find comfort in forecasts and sensors, rebuilding control around the natural environment. Later generations born on the surface would develop an intuitive relationship with clouds, seasons, and landscapes. The first settlers would stand between these worlds. They would understand weather scientifically and meet it emotionally as something almost alien. Soil would also be unfamiliar. Aboard, plant roots grew in designed substrates with known microorganisms and measured nutrients. Planetary ground would contain minerals, chemistry, water, and perhaps life arranged without human supervision. Settlers might avoid direct cultivation until extensive testing was complete. Crops would grow in sealed systems using processed local material. Native soil could be toxic, deficient, biologically active, or chemically incompatible with Earth plants. The dream of planting a seed directly into another world would require patience. A seed represents a biological invasion as well as hope. Its roots alter chemistry, its microbes spread. Its descendants can escape intended boundaries. People raised inside a closed ecosystem would understand these consequences deeply. They knew how one organism could reshape an entire habitat. Children born aboard might become the first adults capable of building a planetary society. Their knowledge of closed systems would offer an advantage. They would treat air, water, soil, and waste as connected cycles. Resource abundance would not erase the habits formed through enclosure. Their descendants born on the planet could find ship discipline excessive. Rivers and atmosphere would appear vast. Throwing away material might seem harmless. History would warn how quickly abundance can be misunderstood. The generation ship could remain in orbit as a school, archive, industrial center, and ancestral home. Some people would choose never to leave it. Others would travel between surface and vessel. Humanity would divide into populations shaped by different gravities, skies, microbes, and childhoods. Survival for those born between the stars would therefore involve several separate tests. The body must develop under artificial gravity and controlled radiation. Pregnancy and childhood must proceed through conditions never observed across a complete human life. The ship must preserve nutrition, medicine, microbial diversity, and reproductive health. The mind must find meaning within enclosure. Children need privacy, play, art, relationships, challenge, and futures extending beyond maintenance duty. A habitat large enough for physical health can remain psychologically narrow when every path ends at a sealed wall. Culture must evolve without losing the technical knowledge supporting life. Institutions must coordinate reproduction and labor while protecting personal dignity. Earth must be remembered without forcing generations to imitate emotions they never experienced. Every layer can support the others or contribute to failure. A generation ship designed only as transportation would endanger the children born aboard. Its designers might optimize engines, fuel, structure, and life support while treating human society as cargo expected to remain culturally stable. The ship would need to function as a birthplace. Hospitals, schools, gardens, public spaces, homes, and institutions would matter as much as propulsion. Children would spend entire lives there. The quality of those lives would determine whether adults remained motivated to raise another generation. Architecture would need variety and the capacity for change. A district useful during one century could become oppressive during another. Walls, lighting, gravity, and public spaces should be adaptable. The vessel must allow descendants to reshape their world without damaging its essential structure. A home continuing for centuries cannot remain a museum of the builder's preferences. The people born aboard would probably survive physically if artificial gravity approached terrestrial conditions. Radiation shielding remained strong, medicine advanced, and the closed ecosystem stayed healthy. Every condition contains uncertainty because no experiment has followed human development through multiple generations in space. Survival biologically would provide only the beginning. A child could be healthy and live within a society that denied meaningful freedom. A population could preserve its numbers and lose the knowledge needed to maintain the habitat. A technically perfect vessel could become emotionally unbearable. The mission would succeed when children grew into adults who considered their lives worth continuing. They would need reasons to love the ship alongside the ability to repair it. Their culture must belong to them, even when the destination and machinery were inherited. Humanity would remain alive through voluntary acts repeated across generations, teaching, caring, repairing, creating, and choosing to have children. Centuries after departure, a child might sit beneath an artificial tree and listen to an old recording of ocean waves. The sound would fill the garden while water moved quietly through irrigation channels beneath the floor. She would know that the recording came from Earth, captured on a coast by someone who died before her grandparents were born. She could close her eyes and imagine a body of water extending beyond every wall. Her imagined ocean might curve upward like the habitat. It might contain the measured clarity of a reservoir or the perfect rhythm of a simulation. The true scale would remain beyond experience. Then the habitat lights would dim toward evening. Leaves would move in air generated by fans. Somewhere behind the garden, technicians would inspect the pumps keeping the trees alive. The child would open her eyes inside the only nature she had ever touched. She might grow into an engineer, physician, artist, parent, or navigator. Her bones would carry the gravity of the rotating ring. Her immune system would carry the microbes of the vessel. Her language would contain Earth landscapes and shipborne meanings. She would never remember a true sky because memory requires experience. She could understand it, study it, simulate it, and long for it. The longing would belong to imagination rather than loss. Her life would still contain mornings, friendships, grief, work, celebrations, conflict, and beauty. Human experience has always adapted to the available world. The ship would narrow certain possibilities and create others no planetary civilization had known. Being born between the stars would shape humanity without removing its humanity. The greatest danger would come from treating shipborne people as incomplete versions of Earthborn ancestors. Their culture, bodies, and instincts would develop according to real conditions. Demanding that they regard Earth as the standard for every life could create permanent alienation from their own home. Preparation for a planet would remain necessary. It should coexist with respect for the civilization formed during transit. The shipborne would arrive carrying knowledge and habits suited to closed ecosystems, collective risk, and long-term resource management. Their difference could become an advantage. They would understand dependence upon technology without imagining technology as separate from nature. They would know that air, water, plants, machines, and society form one connected environment. A planet may feel infinite to them. Their education would remind them that every biosphere also has limits, even when those limits lie beyond the horizon. Could humans survive being born between the stars? A rotating habitat could provide gravity. Shielding could reduce radiation. Closed agriculture could feed generations. Medicine, genetic monitoring, and artificial intelligence could protect pregnancy and childhood. None of these systems has yet been tested across the full arc of human development and repeated reproduction. The physical challenge may become solvable through scale, energy, redundancy, and careful design. The psychological and cultural challenge would remain fluid because each generation changes the society responsible for the next. Children would need a world spacious enough for curiosity, safe enough for growth, and flexible enough to become their own. They would need access to nature that lived, relationships that were private, institutions they could challenge, and purposes achievable within one lifetime. Their survival would depend upon the ship supporting human development rather than merely preventing death. The first generations might speak of themselves as passengers. Later generations would abandon the word. A passenger expects a journey with a beginning remembered personally and an arrival waiting ahead. People born aboard would be inhabitants, citizens, and natives of a moving world. The ship would cross interstellar space while their lives unfolded locally. They would marry, raise children, build rooms, restore forests, repair engines, write music, and argue over laws. The destination would matter, though it would not contain every source of meaning. When the final star grew near, the civilization arriving would differ from the one that departed. Its people would carry Earth inside their genes and archives, the ship inside their bodies and instincts, and the planet ahead inside their imagination. They would step toward a sky that no ancestor aboard had ever seen directly. Perhaps the first shipborne person to stand beneath that sky would remain close to the landing craft. Wind would move across the suit. Clouds would travel without programming. The ground would continue past every structure and disappear behind the curve of the planet. The person might feel exposed, dizzy, and unexpectedly afraid. They could miss the hum of ventilation, the certainty of sealed walls, and the familiar upward curve of home. The planet their ancestors had called freedom might feel overwhelmingly open. Behind them, the generation ship would pass overhead as a moving point of light. Within it remained gardens, schools, graves, and corridors carrying the history of every life lived between the stars. The traveler would look upward at the vessel and recognize home. Later children born on the planet would listen to stories about the ship. They would struggle to imagine a lifetime beneath ceilings, artificial light, and a landscape curving overhead. The idea of sharing one enclosed world with every living human might seem frightening. Their grandparents would explain the sound of pumps at night, the feeling of becoming lighter near the axis, and the scheduled rain falling through an indoor forest. They would describe interstellar darkness visible beyond protected glass and a childhood spent moving toward a star. The planetary children would understand every word and lack the bodily memory behind them. The relationship would repeat in reverse. One generation inherited Earth through stories. Another would inherit the ship. Humanity would continue moving between environments, carrying homes forward through language after direct experience disappeared. People born between the stars would survive by becoming native to the journey. Their bodies would learn rotation. Their senses would learn constructed skies. Their culture would learn to make beauty inside enclosure. Their institutions would learn that freedom and survival must be protected together. They would have no memory of Earth's nature. They would possess nature of their own. Gardens rooted in recycled matter, microbial worlds circulating through water, forests growing beneath lamps, and generations shaped by a vessel traveling through darkness. Their lives would never be ordinary by the standards of the planet that created humanity. Ordinary life would acquire another standard around them. The ship would remain a machine. It would also become climate, geography, ancestry, civilization, and home. Humanity could be born between the stars and remain human. The people arriving at another world would prove it through the simple fact that they had learned how to live before they learned how to arrive.